When the Adeptus Mechanicus march to war, they're joined by their Heavy Battle Servitors, the Kataphron Destroyers.
Anvil of War! Let's talk tactics!
So welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Tactics on Anvil of War Gaming. If you guys enjoy this content, we highly recommend you show us your love by hitting the small little Anvil of War icon in the bottom right hand corner of the screen, or the larger icon on our end screen at the end of the video. This will subscribe you to our channel, let you know when we're posting other videos, and also, again, keep us going because we do this for you guys. So today we're discussing the Kataphron Destroyers, a mainstay of any Adeptus Mechanicus army. Personally, one of my favorite units, and with 2018 chapter approved, these guys came at a bargain. They dropped in points, and I guess kind of everything in the Adeptus Mechanicus army really benefited from that chapter approved, but they made them a slightly competitive army. I actually recently won a small tournament in our local area, local meta, with the Adeptus Mechanicus mono faction, and these guys were a key role in that win, so in those wins I should say. So we're going to talk about these guys a little bit and kind of my preferences to ways to run them on the tabletop, and then some complementing units and stratagems and all that stuff. But at first, we're going to talk about the statistics. So these guys have a movement value of 6 inches. Their weapon skill, ballistic skill 4+, which, you know, is good. It's not great. It's not marine great, but it's decent. They have a toughness and a strength of 5. They have 2 attacks a base apiece and 3 wounds apiece. So with the toughness 5 and the 3 wounds, they also have a 4+ invulnerable save, or sorry, 4+ armor save and a 6+ invulnerable save. 6+ invulnerable save with the Vigilus detachment can actually be brought up to a 5+ invulnerable save using a stratagem, and the well, actually technically 2 stratagem or 2 command points, but you can use a stratagem to give them a boost to their invuln, bring them up to a 5+, and then with some stratagems during the game, again, some more command points, you can bring these guys up to a 4+ invulnerable save, which is pretty good on a toughness 5 3 wound model. They also have some more durability options with the new Servitor Maniple from Vigilus Defiant. We're going to talk about that a little bit when we talk about complementing characters for the unit. But as far as stats are concerned, again, they're decently durable. They're a lot more durable than your other 2 troop choices, but they can dish out a lot of hurt. They come with heavy weapons. They're basically like your devastators for the army, but they're giving you the ability to do that in a troop slot. So their points are kind of mitigated by the fact that you have Skitarii Rangers and Skitarii Vanguard as cheaper options. The Kataphron Breachers are also an option. I'm not a big fan of them personally, just because if you're going to take them, why wouldn't you just take Destroyers, I think. If you guys have an alternate take on them or an alternate way to run the Breachers and have done so effectively, then by all means comment on the video below. We do really want to know other people's opinions and what you guys are running out there, because I mean that's what builds the community and makes it so great. So moving on to equipment options for these guys. Before I get into that, actually I really quickly want to talk about some of their special rules. So they come with a special rule, Heavy Battle Servitor, and what that does is it allows them to move and shoot heavy weapons without penalty. Now, these guys want to be moving 6 inches a turn up the table to get in range, isolate targets, and destroy them. But they also come with the downside of only being able to advance D3 inches, but it's not really a downside because you shouldn't be advancing them ever. You really shouldn't be advancing them ever. If you're doing it, it's just to grab a late game objective, and at that point you don't really care. But the reason you're taking these guys is for their main equipment options: the Heavy Grav Cannon or the Plasma Culverin. The Plasma Culverin is a heavy plasma gun. It's plasma cannon. It's 36-inch range. It's strength 7, buff it up to strength 8 if you overcharge. It's D6 shots per guy, which is pretty gross. I mean, a small squad of 3 of these guys is putting up 10 to 11 shots for just the 3 of them. And if they're overcharged, that's pretty gross. Again, they're hitting on 4+. And if you overcharge them and you do roll a 1 to hit, they are losing a model. It's not just a mortal wound per model. It's actually killing the model outright. So it can hurt. You don't want to be doing this unless you have specific stratagems in place, specific rules in place, or somebody like Belisarius Cawl babysitting them and giving them those rerolls to hit, because that's what's really going to make them shine. On the flip side, you have the heavy grav cannon. Now the heavy grav cannon is 5 shots per model, which is pretty gross. It's only 30-inch range, but strength 5, and it's AP -3, and its damage is D3. So the plasma is damage 2 when it's overcharged, 1 when it's not. These guys do D3 damage if the opponent's armor save is 3+ or better. So, I mean, with the amount of marine stuff and marine equivalent on the tabletop, most vehicles having around a 3+ save, unless you're playing against like a lightly armored army like Eldar, or I should say Eldari or Drukhari, these guys aren't really going to shine as much against them, but they typically, those vehicles have a lower toughness, and when they have a lower toughness, that means that the lower strength on the grav is also better. So, I mean, it's not great to only be doing 1 damage per. The differences in that situation, I'll just kind of specifically tell Eldari and Drukhari, those guys are going to be stacking a lot of minuses to hit, which is going to hurt these guys with their 4+ ballistic skill. So if you're bumping up their ballistic skill, you're typically just bumping it back up to what you're going to be hitting on regularly. And in that situation, you're kind of not wanting to overcharge because you're risking losing models from the plasma. So in that situation, it's almost sometimes better to use the grav. But again, plasma strength 7, them strength 5. So I think they both have a strong place. 5 guaranteed shots versus D6, you're gonna roll a 3 or 4 average per model. The grav with 5 shots is gonna be better, but the higher strength is better. I don't know what the exact math hammer is on these guys, and I'm not going that far into it today, but I think they both have a place. I think throwing in some grav to threaten like Terminator type models or anything like that in your opponent's heavy armor is kind of good. And then the plasma on the flip side of it is really good at cutting through that stuff, but it's better at higher toughness, hurting higher toughness stuff. So depends on what you're playing against. I prefer taking a 6-man squad, 3 of each. 1 6-man squad, their leadership is 7. So with 6-man squad, you don't have to worry about, typically you're not losing 4 of these guys in 1 round of shooting, and therefore you're less likely to lose models to morale. Typically you're only going to lose about 2 of them if the opponent kind of targets them, and if they dedicate a lot of shots to them, they're not dedicating shots to your bigger stuff that these guys are either protecting or preventing from getting charged, and I'll explain that again in a second. So moving on to their kind of fit and what really synergizes well with them as far as Adeptus Mechanicus characters. Obviously, main man, Belisarius Cawl, is if you're taking Mars, I mean, he's kind of an auto include. I don't know why you wouldn't take Belisarius other than not having the model. Just because his points cost is not too taxing, and his ability to give everything a reroll all failed hits. The only thing that's not affected per the recent FAQ is your Overwatch. I hope they clarify that again, because it kind of sucks to lose that. But not getting to reroll hits in Overwatch isn't like something too much to cry over. And Belisarius with his Warlord trait actually increases his 6-inch aura to a 9-inch aura, which is really gross, and helps you kind of keep these guys moving up, but also close enough to your gun line that if you stretch them out in kind of like a crescent moon shape, which is what I typically play them in, you're able to keep them in ranges of auras. So another great model that synergizes amazingly with these guys is the new Tech Priest Manipulus. The Manipulus, if he stays stationary at the beginning of the movement phase, you can choose one of his stances, so to speak. 1 increases the range for movement, assault and assault and advances. Again, you're not going to be using that very often, especially in a Mars gunline army, and I typically play Mars. In a gunline army, these guys are going to be stationary most of the time, so you're going to use the other rule that the Manipulus has, which is increasing their range by 6 inches. So the 36 inches on the plasma goes to 42, and the grav goes from 30 to 36 inches, which is scary. I mean, 42 inches is nothing to scoff at, and a lot of the times opponents will, if they've played against you before, they don't really account for the Manipulus, they don't really think about the Manipulus, and they tend to deploy and kind of try to stay out of their threat range and not thinking about that extra 6 inches, which can really sneak up on people. So if you're watching this video and you're not playing Adeptus Mechanicus and you see a Manipulus in your opponent's army, remember that extra 6 inches because it can hurt. The other thing I want to talk about, obviously, there's secondary weapons. So the secondary weapons, there's the phosphor blasters. So I have my grav guys kitted out with the phosphor blasters. I don't want to say I regret the decision, but I think if I could go back in time, I probably would give them the flamers. I have another 6 of these guys that are assembled, and the rest of them are all equipped with flamers. So these 3, unfortunately, they're going to be stuck with the phosphors. I don't think I'm going to change that up, but what it does is it's a strength 5, 24-inch rapid fire weapon, AP -1, 1 damage. It's not great. It's not bad. It doesn't allow your opponent to get cover saves, so that's kind of cool. But it doesn't really hit home as much as the second option, and the secondary option for these guys is the flamethrowers. So the Cognis flamethrowers, the Cognis Flamers, I should call them, sorry. They are a flamer. They hit on automatically. They're strength 4 base and all the regular flamer details. The Cognis part of their flamers actually gives them the ability to roll 2d6 and take the highest for how many hits. So makes them really good anti-charge units, making them a great screen. So what I like to do with these guys is I like to spread them out in sort of a crescent moon shape in front of my Castellan robots. And because of the size of their base being, I think it's just over 2 inches, the size of their base, if you deploy them about 1 inch away from your Castellan robots, or a couple inches, and then you have a squad of rangers in behind, or something, maybe Vanguard, something light in behind them. If the opponent charges, a lot of the time what they're going to do, if you're running the whole what we call DACA bots, or the Castellan robots with the shooting variant, they're going to lock into place, and when they're locked into place so that they can shoot twice, they can't move. The downside of that is if you use the stratagem to change them, which a lot of people are using right now, they're stuck in that place and they're not moving. So if they're not moving, they are susceptible to being touched by opponent, we'll say, hordes coming in to try to tie them up, or big monsters trying to get in and just kind of chip away at them for the rest of the game, because when they're in combat, they can't fall back if they can't move, and if they can't fall back, they can't shoot at any point for the rest of the game, which basically renders a very expensive unit unusable for the rest of the game, which is not what you want. So by using these guys' large bases as a screen, and with the flamers, you're actually creating a buffer so that if the opponent removes these models from the table, they're not able to consolidate, use their consolidate move after they've cleared out the unit, the 3 inches into your Castellans because of the distance. So it gives you that extra round of shooting, and what damage you can do with an extra round of shooting with 4 or 6 or even 2 Castellan robots locked into place. So these guys are gross for that. I will say with the flamers, another bonus to these guys is if you have the Manipulus nearby, which I think again is now a staple in most AdMech armies. The Manipulus, what he does is he gives them an extra 3 inches on their flamers because of the range, but that brings them from an 8-inch flamer to an 11-inch flamer. And most opponents, when they're dropping in Deep Strikers or using crazy things like Dark Matter Crystal or any of those abilities, we'll say the jump for orcs, anything that removes them from the table and then drops them back on the table, they're typically going to be deploying them 9 inches out. What that means is that they're now within shooting distance when they go to charge, because that 9 to 11, jumping from 8 inches to 11 puts them in threat range. And now the flamers, being meant for killing things in Overwatch, really hurts. Now, there's another kind of nasty side to this, and we're going to get into complementing stratagems now for these guys. So with the stratagems that you can use for them, my absolute favorite stratagem with the way that I play them is the Scryer Skull. So Info Slave Skull is what it's called. And what it does is it allows the unit, if an opponent deep strikes or arrives as reinforcements, again, Dark Matter Crystal or the jump or anything that removes the unit from the table and then redeploys them, counts as reinforcements. Thank you, Games Workshop, for clarifying that. But what happens is you're setting up your unit outside of the 11 inches of these guys, outside of 9 inches of these guys, typically. And what that allows is, if there is an enemy unit being set up within 12 inches of these guys, it allows them to take a free round of shooting at -1 to hit against that unit. Flamers can also be fired at that unit. And if the flamers can be fired at that unit, you don't have to roll to hit because they automatically hit. So it's just that much more damage. A lot of the Dark Matter Crystal shenanigans and the jump is usually targeted on a big screen of boys, jumping in to try to lock up a lot of stuff in your gun line into combat. So if they try to jump in, it can really hurt. Again, if you're playing against Adeptus Mechanicus and you're watching this video, there's a little bit of tip for you. Don't deploy your stuff within 12 inches of these guys, because otherwise you're gonna get hurt a little bit. So anyways, another stratagem that's really good with these guys is the acquisition at any cost. I mean, it's 2 command points. I shouldn't say it's really good, it's good. Acquisition at any cost, if these guys are, I think it's within 3 inches of an objective marker. What it does is it gives them +1 to their armor saves. Or not just armor, sorry, saving throws. So it gives them their invulnerable saves and their normal armor saves get an increase. If they already have cover on them, that's bringing these guys up to a 2+ armor save, which is pretty nasty too. And then it also gives them +1 attack, but I mean, again, you don't want these guys in combat. It's kind of a lot of command points to just give them that +1 save, but if you really want these guys to stick around, it might be worth it. The almighty stratagem for these guys is their synergy with Castellan robots. So now, again, Castellan robots are close by, I think it's 6 inches. Within 6 inches, they're allowed to proc the elimination protocol, or elimination volley. What elimination volley does is it gives +1 to hit for both the Castellan robots and for the Kataphron Destroyers or Kataphron Breachers. Giving these guys +1 to hit and your bots +1 to hit for 2 command points is totally worth it, 100%. Something that you should pretty much be doing every single turn as long as they're on the table. I mean, there's no reason not to use it. I think taking 2 battalions or trying to squeeze 2 battalions into like a 1750 point list or a 2000 point list is a big accomplishment now. It's a lot easier with chapter approved, so you have more command points to spend, so why not spend them on the stuff that's going to be doing the damage, which is these guys and the bots. So that kind of covers I would say the best stratagems for these guys. Then you can jump into the specific to different Forge World stratagems. I mean, there's the Wrath of Mars stratagem. Again, if you guys are using Mars and you're doing a gun line, you're probably going to have some Castellan robots paired off with these guys, but there's still a viable target for Wrath of Mars. What it does is it's on a roll of a 6 to wound, it does a mortal wound. And it's a natural roll of a 6, but with the 5 shots per grav, a full unit of 6 grav could be, or 9, sorry, you can go up to 9. A full squad of 9 grav would be absolutely devastating with Wrath of Mars. I mean, again, the amount of shots the bots can put out, the Castellan robots can put out when they're locked in is is I think more scary at a higher strength, but at the same time, it's worth it. I mean, if you don't have your bots, if you don't have the Castellan robots and you want to use it on something, these guys are definitely the next best thing. The next stratagem I just really quickly want to talk about is the fresh converts for the, I think it's Agrippina. It's the ability to spend 2 command points, and basically if these guys are heavily damaged, it's like the Orc stratagem or the Chaos stratagem. You basically can replenish the whole unit and bring them back on the table. So it's gross. I mean, these guys are an expensive unit, especially when there's a huge squad of them. So if you're taking, you take heavy casualties, you're down to only a couple models on the table after a round of shooting, refresh the unit, bring them back on the table, and the opponent's got to chew through a whole another unit of them. So that's kind of gross. And then the other one is the Ryza Plasma Specialists. What it does is any plasma weapons, it allows them to become, they get +1 to their wound rolls. So if they're strength 8 and you're shooting at, most stuff is not going to have a toughness of higher than 8, so 4+ or 3+ to wound, you can increase that to a 2+ or a 3+ to wound, which is really, really gross when you have a lot of shots at a high AP and lots of damage. You want to stack that with stuff like the Elimination Bolly, or have these guys, having these guys show up on the table. Teleporting in is kind of gross too. They can do a lot of damage, but it also gives them +1 to the damage on their weapons. So if they're overcharged, or you don't even have to overcharge them in some cases, instead of overcharging them, they're doing 2 damage flat, not overcharged. That's kind of gross. Or 3 damage when they are overcharged. So if you're stacking the pluses to hit and your opponent doesn't have a bunch of minuses to hit, you throw that on them and they're going to be good to go. And they're going to take stuff off the table. So really, really strong unit. One of my favorites. I think when they're complemented with the right characters and they're moving up the table and they're dishing out the damage, they're really, really strong. I mean, the weakness to them is that their armor save isn't great. Toughness 5 can get them away with taking some damage, and the 3 wounds. But I think if I'm playing against this army, or if I'm playing against a lot of these guys, I'm going to target them and try to get them off the table. So it's kind of a bit of a chess match. If you're playing them, you want to use the stratagems to keep them on the table if you can, but then also remember, if they're shooting at these guys, they're not shooting at your robots. And another turn on the table with your robots, or full complement of robots, is worth sacrificing a few battle servitors.
Sponsored by...
If you enjoyed our content, consider subscribing to the channel by clicking on the icon on the screen. We also have some more videos for you guys to check out. Go ahead and click those if you want to see more.
Take 2 from the top. Take 2 from the top.
Get ready to clap.